I'm Nat Vaughn. I'm the principal of Blake Middle School here in Medfield. I like to think Blake as a vibrant learning environment for kids and adults. Our mission really is to embrace the culture of a willingness to adapt to an ever-changing world. And that was one of the pieces that really helped us in that sense of embrace and innovation and the idea of iteration and being open to change. The idea of a pilot, like a spirit of pilots and experimentation is important. First of all, I do think that the structure of a middle school and how it's structured lends itself to that, because thinking about small scale initiatives that could then be brought into a larger scale is really important, and thinking in a thoughtful way what that would look like. So the very nature of a middle school model where you have a team of teachers 4 to 5 teachers who have the same group of students, 75 to 80 students, so already you have variance in a pretty healthy sample size. And so it kind of gives a permission of a sense of, this might be messy, but it's a pilot. We haven't full on gone in that. We might think we know the direction, but we're trying it out. So I think pilots really help in the sense of we can get a good snapshot and get enough people around the table to talk about without deciding, let's just jump in and buy all these devices, or we'll fully adopt this curricula without having benchmarks along the way. Someone has an idea, so and I would say rarely it's me. I mean, it might be me, it could be, but oftentimes it comes from the teachers, or some article or some research or some ideas come across, an email comes across your desk, and I think it starts with a conversation. Very often my answer is, yeah, let's give it a try and see so what's that going to look like now, and when do we want to do that? What resources do you need? Who needs to be part of that? How are we going to communicate it? Have we talked to the whole department about it? Are there cross-curricular connections? Is this something that's a real defined need for what population of students? What does communication look like with parents? And then I think from there, all right, what are going to be our, quote, data points? How are we going to assess this process? And from my view is trying to talk about systemic change, that we're not going to change overnight. And I think that's a piece about pilots that are really important, is that top-down initiatives aren't going to have that sustainable change. Assessment can feel like a 4-letter word to educators, but it's really just assessing, and we're just measuring. That's all we're doing. We're not giving a grade to it. We're assessing progress, and what does that look like for the different initiatives. Thinking about that, I think talking with parents really helps with that assessment too, because they have a bigger story to tell than we do. We only see the students at most 7.5 hours a day. They see them more. So we kind of I believe surveys are really important. So we'll ask and have Google Form surveys of kids every year at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. We ask parents those same questions along those lines of, how do you see your student as a learner? How are you as a learner? Your comfort level collaborating, your comfort level sharing resources. When are you using tech integration? What does that look like, and what does that mean for your learning? Asking parents those same things, and we get some bench points along the way. So I think, and then there's also the gut feelings of, do we feel like it's working? So from a theoretical structure, try to think about going back to, so what's the why? Why are we doing this? What's the need? And think about backwards design in the sense of, what's our endpoint, and what are we trying to measure? Why? And if we can't even answer that, well, we're not going to start that project because we're not even sure why. So hopefully that why will help us give some kind of measurable points. It must have been 5 years ago, superintendent called me, it was in June, saying, we came into some money, you up for doing a pilot? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so we had funding for about 85 to 90 iPads from budget, from district money, but then also we have some very, very, very supportive parent foundations that helped fund that initial pilot. Year one was one cluster in 8th grade of one-to-one iPads through the whole year.
What we're gonna do today in the actual lab is we're gonna determine when an object floats, the water that's displaced, what that's equal to.
The pilot program was really like a scientific experiment. We had the entire 8th grade, we had 1/3 of the 8th grade with the iPads. 2/3 of the 8th grade did not have the iPads. So me being an 8th grade science teacher, my kids with the iPad, when we studied a unit on balancing chemical equations, were taking the same assessment that the other 2 science teachers were given, and they did not have the iPad. So we were able to look at results, scores, to see if the iPad was having a negative or positive impact on student learning. And what we found was there was no more than a 5% difference in scores in either direction too. The iPad wasn't causing them to do a lot worse or do a lot better, but the experience that they had and the things that they were creating was really enhancing their learning throughout the process.
So they all have different volumes and they all float. So what we're going to do today is try to figure out when an object floats in water, the water that's displaced is equal to what?
Jason's been a key piece along the way. He's a cluster leader, 8th grade science teacher, was on that first cluster, so he's sort of been one of our pioneers, if you will. He's very open about saying, I'm worried about this. You know, is this, like, does this make sense? What are we doing? And having those conversations with colleagues and opening it up.
The administration was so supportive and flexible, and I think that was a huge piece for us, is they really listened to what was working and what wasn't working, and then they would support us. We need this app, we need that app, we need time together, we need this.
Every meeting we talked about the students and how they were responding to the iPad. We talked about what we're doing, what we can do together, what worked, what doesn't. So it really made our team meetings really dynamic in that way and brought us together. It really bonded us really closely together and made us excited about it. And if one person was really frustrated, they knew that we were there to help them. So when you have that kind of attitude in a cluster, where you're really focusing on something you all want to do well, and you're seeing the progress and the focus and how it's helping the students and how it may be more difficult on one student than another, and we're all aware of that so we can help the student together, it just makes for a much, much better situation altogether. So the measurement progress basically was organically, how are the parents responding, how are the students responding, are we able to provide the same teaching quality as we were able to do before the iPad? How enthusiastic are we about it?
The biggest changes that have happened to the program, I think, have been kind of letting the kids go as far as creativity and their ability to use the iPad. Teachers like control, and in the beginning, everything was really scripted for the students. So I would say you need to do X, Y, and Z, and every student project that they created with this tool was X, Y, and Z. And now, being able to let go and give kids more options and more freedom, we're seeing kids take more ownership because they can do something that they're interested in or pull in stuff that they're interested in and really be innovative and creative, not only with the content, but with the tools that they use to deliver the content. I think one of the reasons that we were convinced to keep the iPad pilot going at Blake Middle School really goes back to the school mission statement and our mantra, which is to have students continually evolve in a continually changing world.
I mean, I think it starts with Nat. He encourages, he says, lean towards yes. He says, try it out. Don't be afraid to fail. And so it's like, no, it's okay to try things out and fail and experiment. That's the message I want to send, and I try to model that in my teaching too. But I totally feel empowered with that based on the culture.
Our essential question underneath our mission is, how can we cultivate and curate the progression of student learning and growth? Well, tech integration can certainly help with that. And is the iPad the right device for us? I don't think it's the be-all, end-all, but for our mission and for our students right now, that's the device that I think best helps us towards that living mission. Experimentation at the root of it is what makes it fun. I think that's what drives me in that sense of learning and thinking, what can we try differently? What's not working? But I think that's the idea. It makes it fun, and we want our kids to adapt. We want them to change. We should too.